I love X-Men comics. They're great. Howdy, I'm Kurt Williams, and today we're talking about issue 1 of Resurrection of Magneto by Ewing and Luciano Vecchio. Here's the cliff notes if you're not caught up. At the beginning of the Krakoan era, all the mutants moved to Krakoa, their own island, and they had discovered immortality. They could bring each other back to life because they downloaded each other's brains, and a circuit of mutants would make clones of their bodies so they could just perpetually come back to life. After the X-Men terraformed Mars, a bunch of mutants went to Mars to live there, including Storm and Magneto, and those two in particular chose to erase their data from the vault so that they cannot be resurrected. Now, a while ago, during the Avengers and the X-Men and the Eternals crossover, this super old and super spooky Eternal basically came to Mars and destroyed it, and one of the mutants who died during that event was Magneto, who cannot be resurrected. And since then, Storm has been pretty much exclusively found in X-Men Red comics. She's not really hanging out in the rest of the X-Men universe. She's just up there doing whatever weird politics they've been handling in X-Men Red. I don't know, I just don't care about the series. I love Al Ewing as a writer, but that series is just so disconnected from everything else, and it's so boring to get through. But I did it. I collected every issue of it, so maybe I'll go back and read it all, and maybe it'll be better if I do it all at once. I don't know. Anyway, now you're as caught up as you need to be. By the time we get to this issue, Storm basically runs Mars and all the mutants that live there, and in the rest of the X-Universe, Orchis is the main villain right now, and they've killed a ton of X-Men. It's a whole big thing. So in this issue, Storm realizes that she needs to find a way to bring Magneto back from the dead so that he can lead mutants through these terrible times. Which is kind of a silly premise because... couldn't she just do it? Here's the thing about Storm. She's always been one of the most interesting, well-rounded characters in the X-Universe. She's a skilled thief, she was worshipped as a goddess, she's highly connected to nature, she's led the X-Men many times, very well most of those times, whether it was a reluctant leadership position or not, and she's always been great at creating this sense of honor and heart in the X-Men. Now, she's also a highly competent fighter and leader and voice of her people, which is all great when it's done by the right writer. But lately, especially during this Krakoan era, we've really only focused on this one aspect of Storm, the tough leader who gets things done and inspires people. And there's a brief attempt to show her softer side in this issue, but it's very fleeting and it's not very convincing. And she's also like in a stable long-term relationship with this guy Craig? Who is this Craig guy? And they've got kids? What's going on? Are they adopted? Who are these people? So anyway, in this issue she has a dream where Magneto is saying that he was wrong and he wants to be saved from the afterlife. So she goes and talks to some other people who I also don't recognize and don't particularly care about, and they help her get to the waiting room, which is like a purgatory for mutants between this life and the afterlife. And that's where she meets Tarn the Uncaring, who's a character from early Krakoan days, and he's kind of interesting, but also I'm not that interested in him, so this conversation she has with him lasts way too long. And then there's this big fight between the two of them, which I think only serves to be eye candy for the comic reader and an opportunity to show Storm being awesome, I guess. This page where she blows him up with lightning is pretty cool, I guess. It's nice to look at. And then she has this long conversation with Ashake, which is a really great throwback, a great way to tie Storm back to her spiritual roots. But that also seemed like a bunch of boring conversation that was probably hinting at concepts deeper in the story than I have the patience to unearth. And then we get into this whole bit with the Phalanx Dominion, which is totally abstract and also very boring to me, and I can't possibly read any stories with the Phalanx in them and not feel like I'm reading a 90s comic. And I just don't like X-Men comics from the 90s. So Storm blasts this Dominion with a bolt of lightning, which is purely symbolic because even a comic reader would know that you can't blast a Dominion with a bolt of lightning and expect it to do anything. We get this neat little Russell Dauterman-esque page of a bunch of Storm costumes. And then she finds herself in the afterlife that she saw in her dream, which is where she's pretty sure Magneto is. And then we get this page of Magneto who is being tortured by what I assume is the memory of all the people that he killed in his life. So to summarize all that, Storm had a dream that Magneto doesn't want to be dead anymore, so she went to the afterlife and fought some people for no good reason, and now she is in the afterlife and that's where Magneto is and she's gonna get him. And I just don't care. I feel like this issue or this series as a whole is trying to tie together all these big concepts that Al Ewing and the team of writers in general have been trying to thread throughout all of this Krakoan era, but it's like all the threads that I wasn't interested in to begin with. And maybe if Jonathan Hickman had been the guy to tie all these threads together, it would have seemed more cohesive, like one big picture coming together. But instead, none of this feels related. It just feels like a bunch of extra stuff going on that we don't need to appreciate the actual drama of the Krakoan era. So there's a lot of cool history being honored and referenced in this issue, and normally I really like like that kind of thing. But it's just not hitting with any weight in this issue. I feel like Storm is almost separate from the rest of the X universe. She hasn't interacted with the X-Men in a while. Not to mention all the stuff that's been happening in X-Men Red could have happened outside of the Krakoan era. We could have sent a few super powerful mutants to go live on this other planet that happened to have a bunch of other mutants and had all the same politics and all the same conflicts going on without needing the context of the Krakoan era. So it just doesn't feel like it matters right now. I want to be focused on Orchis. I want to see Storm back on Earth fighting Orchis. And if she takes her boy Craig along with her, that's fine, I guess, as long as we figure out who the frick he is. Anyway, switching gears to the art, Luciano Vecchio's art is not bad. It's definitely better than some other artists I've seen on X-Books, and it's definitely better than the artist who was doing X-Men Red before this. But there's a lot of panels in this issue that just don't have any emotion infused in them, and the designs of the characters just seem so outdated and boring to look at. This double-page spread was kind of cool. I don't think that there's anything special here. There's nothing unique about this art as opposed to some of my favorite artists, but it's a nice, easy to look at, colorful, interesting double splash page. This page almost feels like it's directly taken from an Onslaught comic. This page is cool that it has all these flashback moments to her relationship with Magneto, but the art itself is not portraying it as emotionally as I think it could be. I don't think there's anything special here other than the moment as it was written. I'll give him credit where credit is due. It's very tricky to draw this abstract realm where a Dominion dwells. This is just a weird concept and nobody really knows exactly how to draw it. And yeah, it's not quite as cool as if like Jack Kirby had taken some crazy photograph and blown it up like he did in the 60s. But it's, you know, doing its best and it could have been done a lot worse. So I guess my conclusion here as far as the art goes is that if you think of comic art, this is a good example of it. This is doing all the jobs that comic art needs to do. And if you were to tell somebody to picture comic art when they've never read a comic, they'll probably picture something like this. But if you're new to comics and you think that this issue was a good example of great comic art, there's so much more out there to discover. So what should be this massive return of a massive character is being kind of pushed into this mini-series with strung out stories that are overly complicated, with art that is unimpressive and just kind of getting the job done. It should be such a big deal that he's coming back, but instead it's just the next issues of X-Men Red. It's really not that great. So, you know, nothing against Storm. I love Storm. She's a great character, but this is a pretty two-dimensional portrayal of her, honestly. I feel like we haven't seen Storm as the multifaceted character that she has always been for a while now. Oh, X-Men comics used to be good. So I'm going to give issue 1 of Resurrection of Magneto like a 6 out of 10. This is okay. It's handling important plot, and it's kind of important to read so that you know what's happening with characters, but it's not blowing my mind. It's just kind of happening on the sidelines, and eventually the ramifications of the series will be the part that we care about, not the series itself. So that's my rating for Resurrection of Magneto issue 1, 6 out of 10. Did you read it? I'm sorry. And what did you think?